all I could see was this light coming in.
The Holy Spirit went, it blew into me.
I have never been the same since then.
That was it. I'm done.
I was born again.
Oh man. All right. Again, seriously, thank you so much, man. I've been looking forward to this. And honestly, I had given up hope because we've been working on trying to schedule this for a while. And I thought, oh well, I tried. And then so I read through Christmas Pig this Christmas for the first time with my daughter. We both read it together. She's 7. So it's perfect. And I
think it may be what she's remembered for more than Harry Potter.
Christmas Pig. You know what? We'll see. We'll see. Time will only tell. Like how
they're making it into an animated. They're making it into an animated special.
Really?
I think it's going to be like Charlie Brown Christmas or Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I think they're going to show it every Christmas time, and because it's so short compared to the entire Harry Potter series, I think it'll be with the book that everybody by Rowling has read.
Right. It's much more accessible.
That's right. Like Tale of Two Cities is the best-selling novel of all time, any language, anywhere. And why? Because it's Dickens's shortest novel. It's not a characteristic Dickens novel.
Yeah.
But everybody reads it in school because they have to read something by Dickens, and so they read Tale of Two Cities.
Because it's easiest. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that. That's so interesting.
So Christmas Pig, I think it's going to be like Christmas Carol or Tale of Two Cities. It's going to be the thing that everybody knows about her. Which is funny because we can't imagine anything but Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, man. Yeah. So I finished reading it, and I knew that you had done like a podcast about it, and so I listened to your podcast and your glow for Christmas Pig and your tie-in with Cormoran Strikes. I'm reading the Cormoran Strike series too, and then later that day, it had been like I hadn't heard from you. It'd been some time, and again, I'd forgotten about it and kind of given up on us meeting up. And then that same day, or maybe the next day, you sent me an email out of the blue. And I thought, it was one of those things like, how you kind of think about somebody and then that person calls you.
Yeah, you have to forgive me. I never give up on correspondence. I really try to respond to everything people send to me. My email address is in all my books. It's been one of the best parts of being the dean of Harry Potter scholars is I get to meet people like yourself that I never would have met otherwise.
Yeah.
And so eventually my email inbox will grow to 150, 200 emails. And I spend a day. I go to church and I come home on Sunday. I go, okay, this is it. I'm going to spend 8 hours.
Catch up.
It's going to be short, but I'm going to just respond to every one of these notes.
Wow.
And so I apologize. It took me so long to get back to you, but
no, I didn't mean that as a critique at all. I just meant that I'm so thrilled that you were finally able to do this, man.
I really try to get back to people promptly, because what a blessing it is to have people read your stuff and say, "Hey, I want to talk to you more about this," especially something like this. I mean, you're bringing me to an audience that I'd never have met otherwise. So thank you for that, and thank you for this. I'm excited about it. Again, I haven't. I've been working, pretty much full time on Cormoran Strike and this current stuff that Rowling is doing. I was talking to a friend in Wales this morning. I haven't reread the Harry Potter books. Since at least since I finished my PhD. And it's just been a long time. Now, I read them. I knew them so well. I wrote like 3 or 4 books on them. That's not like it's a forgotten part of my past. But it was funny to pull this book down from the shelf and say, "Oh wow, this is pretty good." And look at this. But it informs the stuff that I'm doing now because Rowling hasn't changed that much.
Right.
We're learning a lot more about her because she's beginning to tell us more about how she works, how she thinks. We're getting little cracks in the wall she's built around herself in terms of her biography. At her insistence. I mean, she's been saying that her work is inspired by the unresolved psychological issues that she has. Well, that's a pretty big invitation to look into her stuff. But I think in the next year or two, we're going to learn stuff that's really going to change how we think about her books. Because all the things that I say today are going to be about her shed. She talks about the lake and the shed.
Yes,
She gets
I've
her
heard her talk
inspiration
about
out
that.
of the lake, and her shed is where she does her work, where she takes that psychological stuff and turns it into story that has universal meaning rather than just personal meaning.
Yes.
And I'm going to talk about shed artistry today because that's really all we knew about these stories. All we could do is just look at the text and see what literary artistry there is in there, symbolism, etc., structure, those kind of things. And the lake elements, we just didn't have enough information. We knew about her dead mother. We knew about the failed relationship in Portugal. We knew maybe some dad issues, but we didn't know that much about her. And that was by design. She didn't, she really wanted to protect her family. God bless her for that. But now we're getting some more. We're just learning more and more about her. And that's where Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling studies are going. Certainly because of the transgender controversy. A lot of people that would never have pressed to learn more about J.K. Rowling are pressing about it now, probably because they want to attack her. But right now, her kids are they're pretty close to adulthood.
Getting older. Yeah.
I think we're going to see some cracks in Fortress Rowling, but the shed stuff is still more than relevant because it really touches on her core beliefs. Not only does the stuff coming out of the lake reflect the psychological issues, it also reflects her core beliefs. And that's where the Christianity comes in. We don't know that much about her Christianity. And that's going to be part of the things we talk about today. But the things we do know are interesting, especially about Church Cottage, where she grew up in Tutshill in West England. I've been there. It's called Church Cottage because it's right next to a church. It's literally like the parish house to the church. And wow. there's simply no way that place wasn't a place of refuge for her growing up. We don't know the name of the pastor for the church because it was a rotational thing. We'll talk some about that, what she said about that. Because it's most Christians in the United States would not recognize Rowling as a person in their pews. She's if you follow her Twitter feed, and I have to, she is an adamant supporter of all same-sex relationships. And thinks that anybody who doesn't support any kind of, I shouldn't say any kind, but that kind of sexual perversion, that person is a fundamentalist bigot to her. She's a supporter of abortion. No, she hasn't been pressed on that because in the UK, there are hard lines. Abortion is still illegal in the United Kingdom. You still have to have a doctor's thing. It's a soft illegality, but there is a hard line at something like 16 weeks. It's much more strict abortion law than we have in the United States. Sure. So but the fact that she doesn't consider abortion to be murder is for many Orthodox Christians, small o and large o, Orthodox, that's just a shocker. It's just like, really, infanticide is one of your things, so Rowling's Christianity and its art it's a phenomenal achievement. It's one of the most moving and profound Christian works, part of the English canon right now. And yet it's coming from a person that American Christians at least would just kind of whoa,
sure,
who is this person?
Well, they don't even buy it, because
her critics back in the day that said she was opening the gateway to the occult, etc. Wanted to make her out to be a demon worshiper, etc., and she's not.
Right.
But her Christianity, though it has some practical dimensions. I mean, she baptizes her children. She says she goes to more than weddings and funerals, but she's not a regular communicant or something like that in the Anglican Communion that we know of. She's more esoteric, to use religious studies language, than exoteric.
Right.
And maybe in an artist, that's the best you can expect. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point. She's an author. That's, um, I think sometimes with Christians, they want anyone who's Christian to be like their version of Christian that they want. And they want to look at them as like a pastor. So again, if something like gay marriage comes up, also they want to just kind of write them off. I kind of wanted to start off, just tell you kind of my background with Harry Potter, and then we can kind of jump into your background. But
Shoot.
you've blown my mind, man. Because like I grew up, I'm 38, so I grew up when the books were. I mean, I was a kid when they're coming out, and I remember went to kind of more of a liberal church, and there was no sense of like this is a cult or anything like that. In fact, it was people in my church that were saying, "Dude, you got to read Harry Potter." They were obsessed with Harry Potter, and we went on a mission trip to London, and I bought the first three books, like the UK versions or whatever, and I read the first two books. And I was a kid, so I never went on and read the third one because I think Goblet of Fire came out, and I saw how thick it was, and I was like, man, I can't read this. So I gave up, and I was like, I'll just watch the movies. And so I think I watched the first few movies, and then by the time the later movies came out, I was in college. So I didn't really get into Harry Potter and like really watch the whole movie series until I was an adult. And I did it became something we'd kind of watch yearly, and we really got, my wife and I into Harry Potter. And then it wasn't until like 2 years ago when I think I started to read like Hunger Games and Tolkien. And I was like, well, I might as well just jump in and read Harry Potter. Everyone says the books are better. And I was a little like reluctant because like I love the movie so much. I didn't want to become like a book snob, and like resent that the movies weren't.
You're talking to a book snob.
But
Be careful.
I just meant I meant in the sense like where I didn't want to like watch the movies and be like, oh, this is trash now because I know the movies are, I don't want to ruin the movies for me. So anyway, I read the books, and I remember like even just comparing to like Tolkien, I just felt like the Harry Potter series was so good, and I couldn't put my finger on like what made it so good. I just knew there was like something special about it, and of course I knew like part of that was because from like book 1 to 7, the whole thing was mapped out. The whole, it's just brilliant. But I just knew there was like something that just made it like, for me, like, I don't know, the best thing I've ever read. And it wasn't until like I was at a church and someone recommended a podcast called the Literary Life Podcast, and she did a series on Harry Potter. In the first episode she put out, she had some resources for like her whole thing was like that Harry Potter was Christian, and she was getting, doing a deep dive into it, and she had referenced some of your books. So I got on there and I went straight to the source, and that's when I read your book, and it just like it unlocked the whole thing for me. And then I was able to kind of finally put my finger on like, okay, now I get like what it is. And that's your book is named How Harry Cast His Spell. And I thought it was brilliant because I was able to kind of finally figure out and unfold like the genius behind the story. And truth be told, when I listened to that podcast originally, it was very hard for me to like accept that this was like a Christian work. And so I went to prove it. And so I went like, she quoted some quote kind of proving that she was in fact not only Christian, but like the books themselves were like deeply Christian. And I spent forever scouring the internet trying to find this quote. But I think it was, basically someone was interviewing her about the books. And they brought up the fact that so many people think she's like a cult. And I had kind of bought into that a little bit. Like it always kind of bothered me a little bit that like there's such dark magic in it as a Christian. I didn't, it wasn't enough to like keep me from like watching it or reading it or whatever. But there was a little bit of a sense of like, is this like a little too edgy or something? But her response was, she was talking about the irony of it. And she said that she didn't want to talk about the ending of the books because it would reveal to her, it would be obvious that she was in fact a Christian. And I went and I found it. It was like from like 2007, I think, in the Vancouver Sun. And sure enough,
no, it was actually much earlier. It was
earlier.
It was in 2000. That's why she was saying
that's right.
about the finish.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. 2000. Anyway, so I was like, okay, I felt like it was still weird hearing it. And so I found all these other quotes. And it's kind of like you said, it seems like she does have a Christian faith, but she's not necessarily like, an evangelist or anything like that. But,
Well, she's
um,
English. Talking to
right.
someone in English about their faith is like talking about their preferred sexual position. I mean, it's really, I mean, it's not something that in public we're going to talk about this.
Right.
It's
Right.
considered to be a very bad form, bad taste, which is funny to us. I
It
mean,
is. Yeah.
Americans are more likely to talk about. I mean, you're not supposed to talk about sex and religion. We're much more likely to talk about religion than sex. I mean, it's. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
No, I think that was it. Anyway, I think that's kind of my little story. But it it's been great getting into this, and I like the books like took my fandom for Harry Potter and just like skyrocketed it. And then like after reading some of your works, it's made it even more. And so like I'm trying to get like people at my church now, like, dude, you have to read Harry Potter. It's Christian. Anyway, so I'm just pumped to like unpack all this with you today. But I want to talk to you about. I think I've heard your story, but for those listening, what's your background with? I mean, you're known as the Hogwarts professor now, and you're following all of J.K. Rowling's works, but I just want to know, like, how did you become Hogwarts professor, and where did the obsession start with you?
Wow. The obsession. That's scary. All right. Well, I grew up in a Christian household, but it was nominally Christian. My mother was from a Methodist background. She married into my father's Episcopalian background. I think there was once a meme among American Christians, if they raided your house, could they find enough evidence to convict you of Christianity?
Yeah,
And in my house, there were Bibles in the house, and we went to church, regularly, maybe not every Sunday, but more Sundays than not. Um, at least until I was in high school. My parents stopped going when I was in high school. I kept going. One thing I have in common with Rowling was that usually people in adolescence, they move away from their parents' church going. My parents stopped going to church and I kept
you
going.
did. Yeah,
Rowling
you
did
did
the
the
same
opposite.
thing.
Yeah.
Rowling did the same thing. And but I never remember my parents reading the Bible. It was definitely on the shelf, but wasn't a living thing. And then I found out years later, my mother had really grown up in a very intense WCTU sect of Methodism and stuff,
Hmm.
and she'd really try to put that behind her. But she would talk to me about the book of the letter of the Romans was her favorite book in the Bible, and I was like, wow, you have a favorite book in the Bible? I mean,
Hmm.
that's something.
Right.
But I was an adult convert to Orthodox Christianity, consequent to studying perennialism, and I actually went through all my mentors at the University of Chicago were Roman Catholics, so I went through RCIA, and my wife and I just couldn't make that jump. So we became Orthodox. We were called to Orthodoxy, and uh, we were kind of crazy family. My wife and I got married. She was 33 years old. We had 7 children.
Hmm.
And it's been a real adventure. I mean, we birthed our kids at home. We homeschooled. We did all these things. Well, in 2000, we were living on a farm in Pearland, Texas, about 17 miles south of Houston. And I was working at Whole Foods Market. I still work for them. Um, my muggle job, and a woman there, Tiffany, Tiffany Flowers, was working with me in the HR office at this one of the bigger stores in Houston, and she said, "John, you've got to read these books." I mean, she
Yeah.
had she had things in her cheek and tattoos all over her face. I don't want to say typical Whole Foods. Tiffany was a pretty special person, but there was definitely not a big recommendation to an Orthodox Christian that this woman was recommending Harry Potter to me.
Mm.
And I said, "Well, what's it about?" I'd never heard of it. We
Oh
lived out,
wow.
we lived on the planet Xeno, no, no,
Yeah.
no television, nothing like that. And I said, "So what's Harry Potter about?" And this is 2000. This is the fourth
Yeah.
book is coming out that
It
summer.
was big already. Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, it's about a boy, and he finds out that he's a wizard, and he goes to, witchcraft school." And I'm like, "Whoa,
Yeah. What is this?
not my thing, dear.
Yeah.
Not really going to bring this into my house, with my kids." My oldest is about your age. She was born in 88, so
Yeah.
about that time. And she, I'm just like, forget it. Well, I would go home to my wife and said, "Tiffany recommends that we get these Harry Potter books." And my wife, she grew up in Istanbul and Rome. She speaks 5 languages. She worked at the UN. She plays the violin. She can raise the dead with her cooking. This is a very intelligent woman. And she goes, "No way." She goes, "They sell Harry Potter books at the gas station. These things are everywhere.
Yeah, they're
It
super
can't be
popular.
good."
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
can't be
trash.
good if they're selling that well. They can't be good. And so we wrote the whole thing off. Well, our kids, they're homeschooled. This property had another family on it that had 6 kids. It's sort of a self-contained place. They didn't know that much about Harry Potter, but this woman that my wife was cooking for, oddly enough, she was a pediatrician. And our kids were almost never sick, so they never went to her. But anyway, she had a good sized family, and she invited us over. She loved our kids and stuff. And one day, she gave my oldest daughter a copy of the Sorcerer's Stone, the
okay.
Scholastic paperback.
You got it from both
And so
hands. It keeps coming. Can't get rid of it.
I'm in our tiny little house, and my daughter's sort of backing up to the bedroom, and I'm like, "Why are you walking backwards?" She's
trying
like,
to hide
"Well,
the book
I don't know." I said, "Well, come on, what do you got? What are you hiding here?" And
Yeah.
she holds up the Harry Potter book, and I says, Harry Potter has come over the walls." Okay. So I said, "Here's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to read that book, and tomorrow morning I want to explain to you why we don't read trash like this."
Right. You'd already had your mind made up. That's great.
It was Sorcerer's Stone, and a real touchstone in magic and literature is the difference between invocational magic versus incantational magic. Invocational magic means you're calling down demons to help you out. It's like I'm calling on powers and principalities to get what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Never a good deal to call in the psychic realm. Oh, every revealed tradition says don't be playing that game. You lose. But that's what invocational magic is, and it's certainly in Christianity it's condemned. That's common to both testaments. Don't play that game. And sorcery is invocational magic. So I'm like, as soon as Harry raises his wand or invokes some demon, to do his will or whatever, some genie, that's it. We don't read this stuff.
You're ready to explain that to your daughter.
But the good stuff is the incantational magic. That's the stuff you see in Shakespeare, Tolkien, Lewis. Lewis actually in Prince Caspian, he actually lays out a conflict between invocational and incantational magic. Incantational magic means literally to sing along with, and it's harmonizing your speech with the word which creates everything moment to moment. So you're harmonizing with the word of God, and that has a magical effect. All right. Now that requires a Christian worldview. You can't have incantational magic unless the world is made of speech. So that's why it's kind of a given in English fantasy literature, incantational magic. But I'm thinking this is invocational because the title is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I mean, it's right there, sorcery. Okay, it's a gift. So I'm thinking this is not going to be a long read. As soon as I get into this book and Harry, calls down somebody to help him out, I got it. I can close the book and next morning give her the whole invocational magic speech and explain to her again about the realms of reality. Our realm, the psychic realm, the spiritual realm, and actually talk about those things. I thought, wow, great homeschooling lead in there, segue for this whole thing. I get into the book and I realized fairly quickly that it's not a sorcerer's stone, it's a philosopher's stone. I'd studied, one of my favorite books is by a man named Titus Burckhardt called Alchemy. And it's largely about esoteric alchemy, and I knew that it bled into literature. In Shakespeare, especially through a book by a man named Martin Lings. So I was like, wow, this is literary alchemy. This is a wow.
Yeah,
And
you picked it up
and
right
then
away.
there's the incantational magic and the symbolism and the names and stuff. I'm just doing the whoa, whoa, whoa. And then there's that finish in Philosopher's Stone, which is the real title of the book, where Harry is wrestling with Quirrell-de-Mort, and he puts his hand on his skin and he burns him. Well, I mean, the touchstone of Orthodox, I don't even call it soteriology, but really the afterlife to the Orthodox is that we will all go to God's glory. That God's glory is one thing, but we will experience that very differently depending on our preparation for God's glory. We will experience that as heaven, as what we've been longing for our entire lives, or we'll experience that as agony, physical agony, burning.
Mm-hmm.
And so this sacrificial love that Harry has in his skin from the death of his mother causes Quirrell-de-Mort to burn, to just, I'm reading this saying, whoa, man, this is better than Narnia. This is a wow, what a great thing, And so I'm up now, and now I'm up until like 2 or 3 in the morning reading this book saying, whoa, where did this thing come from? What? So I'm really incredulous. And my daughters get up the next morning, they come out of their bedroom like, here we go,
Expecting
time for a lecture from Dad.
It's like
Dad's going to tell us we can't
totally
read this book.
now.
And I'm like, hey, I got good news and bad news, and they're like, okay, that's a different tack from Dad. I said, the good news is you can read this book. And my oldest and her next oldest, two daughters there, they look at each other like, we can read the book. And I give the book to the oldest, and she flips through it. She thinks I tore pages out or something. She thinks I'm
very skeptical.
I'm like, what was this? And I said, she goes, what's the bad news? I said, the bad news is you have to read it. It's that good. It's really, it's a wonderful thing. And she bolts into the bedroom, and I hear her lock the little door,
Start reading right away.
Before he changes his mind,
Yeah.
And I went out that day and I bought the other 2 books that were for sale.
Yeah.
This Goblin hadn't come out yet, and I started to read it to the whole gang. And it's been a delightful ride ever since. But then I found out that day from Tiffany. I said, hey, Tiffany, I'm sorry. I judged your book by your cover here. And you were right. That book was really good. And she says, oh, John, I'm so relieved. She says, the churches in Houston are burning that book everywhere. And I was like, what?
This is the first.
Because again, I'm totally removed from the whole controversy. I had no idea the Potter panic was in full swing. And I was like, what are you talking about? These books are neck deep in Christian symbolism. There's a phoenix flying around here, there's a unicorn, and I was like, what? Come on, this is Christian symbolism 101, And she's like, John, no, you don't understand. And so, she went to the computer and brought up some stories. I was like, Houston Baptist is burning these books. And I'm like, what? Is this really? I said, Tiffany, I'm telling you, I'm not an English lit guy. I'm a classicist, and I am an Orthodox Christian, and I know something about traditional literature. But I said, these books are straight out of the Inkling tradition, and they're hilarious for one thing. They're the funniest books I've read in a long time. But book I read, and she was just like, John, I'm telling you, that's not what your fellow Christians are saying. And I thought, well, that's going to play out. There are many Christians much more intelligent than I am, and certainly about things like this, and they're going to figure this out. I figured it out on first reading. How could they not figure this out?
Right.
Well, as it turned out that no, it never happened. I moved to Washington State. Our bishop asked us to help start a church up there. My family was like instant congregation, so they moved us up there to help start this church. And I went to a C.S. Lewis Society meeting, and these guys there, they were in their 50s and 60s, which I thought was very old at the time. Wow. And they were saying how bad the Harry Potter books were, and why weren't these kids reading the Chronicles of Narnia? Why weren't they reading Lord of the Rings and stuff?
Yeah.
And I said, whoa, these books are great. Now, at that point, I had read the books myself. I had read them out loud to my kids, the first 4. And on the travel up to Washington, I'd listened to them on tape.
The audiobook.
So at that point, I read them 3 or 4 times, and I really had this stuff really at the top of my head.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, Mr. Newcomer, why don't you give a talk to our C.S. Lewis Society about the virtues of the Harry Potter novels?
Oh, wow.
And I said, yeah, great. Got it. Done. I came in with my flip chart. You know, I'd been a trainer at Whole Foods, so I was presentations. I love to talk. Right, let's do the whole thing. So I did a flip chart. I just fire hosed them with all the stuff that eventually becomes my first book. Yeah. And there was a woman there who was a librarian.
Oh wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And she said, John, that was 90 minutes in, you know, with a fire hose. That was way too much. Could you give us 3 talks at the library about that? And I said, sure. I've already done all the work. I'll just slow it down and fill it out, you know? And she's like, that's great. That's great. Well, what I didn't know was, well, 2 things. One, the head of the C.S. Lewis Society there is still a very dear friend of mine. We're in touch almost every day. His wife was recovering from carpal tunnel syndrome or something like that. And she was a book designer. And I think she was driving my buddy half crazy because she couldn't work on the computer, couldn't do these things. All she could do was like work a mouse or something, you know. And he said, she needs a project, John. So he came to my talks. And at the end of it, he said, will you write these things up?
Wow.
Can you just take all the things you've written up? And then each of those talks was like a couple of hours. And so it was a lot of stuff. So I spent, I think 8 weeks, you know, and I don't touch type. I do my little 2-finger type things, the shift key and another thing moving around.
Yeah.
And I typed this book up, and his wife turned it into a beautiful book. It was called The Hidden Key to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And
wow.
He said, look, see, I got this. He had enough money that it wasn't really a hardship to him. He said, look, I'm going to buy 500 copies of this thing, and you'll have a book on your resume. So you can get like a teaching job. This will be something that you've written this thing up, and, you know, Colleen will have this thing and we'll sell those books and we'll be done with this. And I'm thinking, okay, that's great. Well, 2 things happened that I didn't expect. One, every talk at the library was filmed by the local cable station. Well, this is the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. You know, this is not the edge of the earth, but you can hear the water going over the side. I mean, you're close. I mean, you're way out there. You know. Yeah. And I thought, okay, the cable station on the Olympic Peninsula. Who's gonna see that? Well, no, cable stations in the Northwest. This is all on VHS tape. They trade tapes. Because they need programming, right? And so all of a sudden, this is being shown in Spokane and Seattle and Portland, and you know, goodness. And there's a guy out there that's saying that Harry Potter is not only not the gateway to the occult, but that it's the reason it's so popular is because of all the Christian content in it. Well, I'm typing up the book while this is spreading around the Northwest, and my buddy. This huge truck pulls into our circular driveway. Because trucks on the peninsula have to go all the way around the Sound. I mean, they're too big to come across on the ferries and stuff, and they have to make several stops because they're not making that trip for just one thing. And so this guy gets out of his truck and he starts pulling these pallets off the truck. And he pulls like 7 pallets off the truck. And I'm thinking, well, he's got to unload to get to my stuff before he goes up to the grocery store or wherever, what else he's delivering. No, he comes over to me with a clipboard and says, you know, a sign for these. And I said, no, it's only 500 books. Yeah. And he looks at it and he goes, no, it's 5,000 books.
Did you miss or did they have to there was more demand?
I get on my flip phone and I call my buddy and say, wow, we got a real problem here. They didn't print 500 of these things. They printed 5,000 of these things.
We got too many books.
And he says, oh, John, he goes, it's economy of scale. It wasn't that much more to get 5,000 than to get 500. So I ordered 5,000.
Oh my gosh.
And so my kids and the neighbors come over. We have to carry all these boxes up to our attic. And I'm imagining my kids being crushed as these boxes come through the ceiling or something, you know. And it's everybody's the self-published author's nightmare. You know, is at his death they have his funeral pyre is
All the
being
books.
lit up by all these books that never sold, right? I mean, he has in his attic. Well, that didn't happen because I sent the book out to a couple of people in the Harry Potter thing I didn't know at the time. Steve Vander Ark being the most notable one at the Harry Potter Lexicon. And the book was up on Amazon. My buddy made sure that everything was beautiful there. And all of a sudden, I'm having to mail. I have to go to the post office every day with 2 or 3 boxes of these books to send to the various Amazon distribution centers.
Mm-hmm.
And soon this thing just explodes. And, you know, long story short, I get an agent. She sells the thing to Tyndale. Tyndale makes it Looking for God in Harry Potter. Terrible title. And it sells, you know, tens of thousands of copies. It really flies off the shelf. Eventually, when the last book came out, I insisted they change the title, and they came up with this beautiful book, How Harry Cast His Spell.
Yeah.
And I've written, you know, many other books since then. I mean, there's the Deathly. I'm looking over on my shelf here. There's the Deathly Hallows lectures. There's the ring composition book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Penguin published Harry Potter's bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a strange thing, but really all of it comes back to the Christianity side to the thing.
Yeah.
Because I was answering in my book the accusations of a specific American evangelical writer named Richard Abanes, who wrote a book called Harry Potter and the Magic spelled with a CK, and Harry Potter and the Bible, you know, imagination and magic. And it was a dreadful book. Totally misrepresented Harry Potter. Wasn't a good look for Christianity because of its ignorance of the Christian tradition of stories and letters. And my book was basically the first one was just a point for point. You know, this is wrong. This is not only wrong, it's stupid. You know, I tried to be kind, but it was really pretty. It was like you're saying things here you can't possibly know about this woman.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're breaking commandments right and left. So let's back off on this thing being the Christian side to Harry Potter, and then explaining, you know, what the books meant.
Yeah.
And how to understand them.
Yeah.
And that made me Lev Grossman tagged me as the dean of Harry Potter scholars. I went to a Potter convention in Orlando, Florida, which is about as far as you can get in North America, apart from the Olympic Peninsula to Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
Gave a talk there on alchemy in Harry Potter, and it was voted. There was like 80 talks at this conference. It was voted the best talk at the conference.
Oh, man.
Terry Mattingly was there, and he said they carried Granger out of the room like a rock star, you know. And this was not a, this is I mean, that group was, you know, more than predominantly unchurched. One of the questions was, one of the questions afterwards was, I'm not buying this Christian thing here. I am, you know, I was abused by my pastor. I'm not buying your Christian shtick or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, it's not for sale. It's not for sale.
Mm-hmm.
I'm simply describing to you how the books work and why it resonates so profoundly with readers globally.
Yeah.
If you're taking this as an altar call, you know, I'm a ordained reader in the Orthodox Church, but I'm not here to, you know, chrismate you or baptize you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to explain to you why you love these books.
Yeah.
And why you love these books is that Tertullian said this, you know, all souls are Christian souls. And the reason this thing is working is because there's a part of you that is the logos within you. You know, John 1:9. It's the light that's in you, and it's responding to this illumination from this alchemical. The reason this goes from Chaucer and Shakespeare to Lewis, Tolkien, and Rowling is because it works.
Yeah.
Because it's part of how the human being experiences story. And that got a huge round of applause. People were like, "Oh, good, he's not here to baptize us," but it still was very challenging. You know, a real scholar, man named Philip Nell. He's at I think at Kansas State University. He'd already written a book about Harry Potter, and He was very skeptical about the stuff I was saying, but he was at the lecture, and I remember him being astonished because I was a self-published author and I was
Mm-hmm.
kind of a goof as far as he was concerned. I didn't have a PhD at the time.
Right.
And he came up to me afterwards, and it was a throng. I was pretty much being, it was a crazy theater style thing. They all seemed to come down at once to the table. Um, I sold out every book I brought with me. That was the best way. I paid for my flight. It was great. And Philip Nell walked up to me, and what was clearly astonishment, he said, "John, I learned something from your talk today." Which is one of the greatest backhanded compliments I've ever received. But that was really the even Nell, who was a fan, he's an expert in children's literature, which was really the only academics that were reading Harry Potter at the time were kid lit people.
Yeah.
Even he was taken aback by the possibility that Rowling was using, Shakespearean formula, symbolism and stuff. That really took him aback. But that's the hurdle that had to be cleared. Was we had to get over, forgive me, this word's much abused, but the misogyny that's implicit in most things. I mean, she didn't look like, C.S. Lewis. She didn't act like J.R. Tolkien, right? I mean, she was a brassy, single mom. And the books really walk the edge there about the whole magic thing. That people just didn't want to believe that she had the merit, that she had done the work, that she was a really quality writer.
Right,
Again,
right.
that my wife the same way. These books are so popular, they can't be that good.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's clearly illogical. Some books can be popular because they are that good.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, Shakespeare has survived for who knows how many centuries because the stories, they hold up.
They're good. Yeah.
And Rowling's books, boy, they hold up. And we did at that point. That's two. It was Nimbus 2003. It was the name of the conference, because we were in that gap, that huge gap between Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix. The 3-year summer, they call it, Harry's 3-year summer from Hogwarts. That, thank God for that gap, because that's where I published my book and all those things. If the books had kept coming out one at a time, there's no way I could have done it.
Right.
All right. That's probably a lot more than.
No, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Go ahead. I was just going to say, like, it's so interesting to hear you talk like that, because that was so much of my experience as well. And that's why I wanted to have you on, is because I want others to have that experience where I felt like the books were unlocked. And I don't know what it is. I think you laid it out for all those reasons. There's that block where you can't really accept it as being Christian, but it's like, for whatever your background, in your knowledge on literature, you were able to kind of just see it right away. And I think the Harry Potter fandom really needed your voice to put, again, the reasoning behind the obsession. And so it's just been wonderful for me to be able to get behind that and appreciate the work even more. And so I think, just like you said, when I first heard that, like, literary life podcast, and she even like quoted it, but she didn't have the source. She was like, I couldn't find the source, or whatever. I had to go find that source, and I had to find the article, and I had to find the quote, because I literally didn't believe it. I was like, this can't be true. It's a rumor. And so when I found it, I was still like almost in disbelief and in shock. And then even like listening to your work, some of it's like, man, is he pushing this too far? Is he seeing like the Christian content in here that's not there? And when I read your book and you laid it out, like, there's some of it that's like, okay, well, yeah, this is really, it's obvious, and it's very intentional. Like, much of the symbolism, I think, was, some of the stuff that really bought me in. But there's still certain aspects from, like, man, is this, I don't know if Like, did she write that intentionally into, like, so for example, first I'm gonna read some quotes so that if people are still experiencing that skepticism that I am, like if you Google J.K. Rowling Christian, there's a wiki site called her, what's it called? J.K. Rowling, it's called Religious Debates Over Harry Potter Series. And then so I've got this is where I'm reading her quotes from here. This is from that 2000 interview that I alluded to earlier in the Vancouver Sun by Max Wyman, and she says that So this is the quote. She says that yes I am. It seems to offend the religious right far worse than if I said I were. If there was no God. Every time I've been asked if I believe in God, I've said yes, because I do, but no one ever really has gone any more deeply into it than that, and I have to say that does suit me, because if I talk too freely about that, I think the intelligent reader, whether 10 or 60, will be able to guess what's coming in the books. Here's another quote, 2007. This is an interview.
The MTV interview.
Yeah. That was the MTV one. Yeah, they asked her earlier, and she said that she had baptized her daughter. She's like, go to a church myself. And then, so this is another quote where she says she was officially raised in the Church of England, but I was more of a freak in my family. I didn't talk about my religion in our home. My father didn't believe in anything. Neither did my sister. My mother would incidentally visit the church, but mostly during Christmas. And I was immensely curious. From when I was 13 to 14, this is kind of what you're alluding to. I went to church alone. I found it very interesting what was being said there, and I believed in it. When I went to university, I became more critical. I got more annoyed with the smugness of religious people, and I went to church less and less. Now I'm at a point where I started, yes, I believe, and yes, I go to church, a Protestant church here in Edinburgh. My husband is also raised Protestant, but he comes from a very strict Scottish group, one where they couldn't sing or talk. So those are a little of her direct quotes. I went and watched a documentary where they showed that church where she used to attend. It was like walking distance from her house. That said she was baptized in that church. So I think that was, I had to do that digging myself before I could just finally accept and be like, my goodness, this is legit. These really are, Christian works, and you lay it out so well, chapter by chapter. The way you structure the book is you kind of just take it one topic at a time, and I'd like to kind of begin to unpack that. But before we kind of get into like the actual content of your book, I guess one of the things that you said that kind of blew my mind, and I'm gonna have to put spoilers in the title of this so people know that there's going to be spoilers. But so in Philosopher's Stone, where we see Quirrell drinking the blood of the unicorn, you talked about that.
Well,
you tied it into.
That was the moment. I was like, whoa.
See, there's so many things that, like, for you, like, you saw, and there's like you picked up on all the stuff, but like for the average reader, they're like, when someone, I've heard like, oh, they're kind of Christian or whatever, but there's the obvious like death and resurrection at the end of Deathly Hallows. But outside of that, I missed on all this symbolism and all this stuff that you saw so clearly, right? I didn't have like that like aha moment that you had. And so the death and resurrection, I kind of thought, well, yeah, but I mean that's kind of like a common trope. I don't know, even though it's deeply a Christian thing. I don't, know if that's enough.
After 3 days, Harry wakes up after 3 days in the hospital.
That's in the first one. I was thinking about in Deathly Hallows, the death and resurrection there. But you're talking about Philosopher's Stone. So again, I missed this stuff. Now it's like obvious, but about the unicorn blood, you tie that into, what Paul's talking about. The Lord's Supper to the Corinthian church, and I'm like, what? So I'm like, is that something that you're seeing, or how can you distinguish between once you lay the foundation of, okay, yes, these are Christian works, how can you be certain that what you're seeing is not a fabrication, or is that how certain are you that is something that she intended to make that tie with, like, go ahead and explain how that ties in, how the unicorn blood ties into
Well,
First
well,
Corinthians
I
9.
get to the unicorn blood in a second, but
Yeah.
I mean, when people ask me, how do you know you're not making all this stuff up? And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, every single book, there's a formula. Every book follows a formula. It's Privet Drive, Magical Escape, Mystery. The two Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew run around the castle trying to figure out what's going on. And then there's a big confrontation, and they have to make a choice. And Harry decides to do the people saving thing, and puts his life on the line, and he loses. Almost every time he loses, and and then a symbol of Christ appears, and Harry is raised from the dead. And then he goes and talks to Dumbledore about how wrong he was and how stupid he was and how the mistakes were made. And then we go back to Privet Drive and we start to cycle over again. Alchemy is a 7-stage thing. And so, so we get 7 books. Usually these schoolboy novels are 6 books. She made it 7 to do the whole alchemy thing. When you see it again and again and again,
Right.
that resurrection experience is such a huge piece of Harry Potter, and that there's always a symbol of Christ there. It's a philosopher's stone. It's a phoenix. It's every book it appears. Boom, there. We get it. And you say to yourself, if you know Christian symbolism, which is not something that's taught in private schools or public schools in the United States,
Right, yeah.
and it's certainly not taught in the churches. So it's something that Rowling certainly understands, and it's almost like she uses so many of them, and with such frequency that it's almost like she's writing a parody as much as she's writing a Christian fantasy book. She says she's not a fan of Christian fantasy, but boy, she pulled this off. That to me, the repetition and the importance, it's the climax of every book, is essentially a death and a resurrection in the presence of the symbol of Christ. Now, it's not, Harry only becomes a symbol of Christ himself at the very end of the book, where he offers himself up literally to death, not hoping to get away from it, not to put himself at risk of death, but literally to die, just to say, I've come here to die, to save my friends. Okay, Harry's become Billy Budd there. He's really dying, and it has a salvific thing for the world. It's much like Christmas Pig, in that respect. That all the times before that, Harry is just a Christian everyman. He's just a human being, and he has to make these choices that eventually get him to a position where he's going to choose a greater life than his ego priorities of survival. He's going to do the right thing at whatever risk because it's the right thing. And that, when people say, how do you know they're Christian? I'm like, well, that's pretty much the Christian life, is putting off the old man and putting on the new man. And it's not a small thing. Now, you can do all things in Christ, and it's actually an easier life when you've passed through it. But the decision to move from the old man to the new man is the crisis of the human life. In Christ. And it's what you're designed for. Again, every soul being a Christian soul, but it's not an easy choice, and it's a harrowing one. And Harry goes through that every single time. When people say to me, how do you know it's a Christian story? I'm like, that's all you need to know, is that.
You look at the structure, the layout,
I mean, again, if every single book is laid out to have that climax with that symbolism, with that result.
That has to be intentional, yeah.
I mean, okay, then if you're saying to me that's not intentional, you're saying that she just got lucky and she's stumbling in the dark, but she's falling into the same hole every single time, and it has this same resonance with every reader around the world. That's preposterous.
You're just being a skeptic at that point if you.
That's right. And now it's like you're saying you're a fundamentalist in that, or you don't think women are that intelligent. Or you don't think that lower middle class English women she went to University of Exeter is a pretty serious place, but she was not a very good student. She was the first person in her comprehensive or high school, but she didn't get into Oxford or Cambridge. that's a long story, but she winds up at the school. It's not quite a party school, but she was not a very serious student. But the stuff that she learned there, I mean, she was a classics major in the sense of classical studies. She didn't study Latin and Greek. She studied myth, and that's what informs her work is mythology. The stuff she learned in her comprehensive from a woman named Lucy Shepherd about structure, that's really critical for understanding her works. What Mary Douglas called ring composition, what Christians call chiastic structure.
Yeah.
Informs everything she writes. Longer Twitter threads, she writes them in chiastic structure.
Wild. That is so wild.
Nothing. She does nothing that's not A, B, C, D, C, B, A. This is what she does. And there's a reason that informs all of Scripture too. I mean, you can take Paul's letters, and they're laid out on a chiastic structure. Yeah. That work's been done. You take the first 5 books of the Old Testament. It's a chiastic structure. You can take small things like the sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham. That is a chiastic, perfect ring. Mary Douglas uses it in her book. I mean, it's the guy who first broke the chiastic thing was an Old Testament graduate student at Fordham University in New York.
Really?
His name is escaping me right now. But he said, I said to him, "How did you see this?" The 5th book came out, and he said the entire series is a chiastic structure. And I said, "How do you see that?" He says, "John, in my work in Old Testament studies,
that's so used to it, huh?"
Yeah, he says, he asked his professor once, "Is this a chiasm?" And the guy says, "If you think it might be, it is, because it just informs everything." Yeah. Of that. Now, and that isn't just something that's the Aeneid is that way, parts of the Odyssey. I mean, and Mary Douglas says it is the human way to tell stories, that it's every culture, every civilization, male, female, old, young, whatever genre you're doing, all of it's informed by chiastic structure or ring writing.
That's
and
how the Lord
Rowling,
writes. It's crazy.
Rowling was taught that in high school, and she got it. She got it. She said that she was OCD as a teenager, and I think that she's OCD now. She's right now. Not only is the Harry Potter, every Harry Potter novel is a ring, and the entire series is a ring. And now the Cormoran Strike novels, they're written in parallel with the Harry Potter novels, and the parts of the Cormoran Strike novels, they all have 7 parts. The parts of the novels are also rings.
Chiastic.
Right. So you've got the parts and the novel itself, and then its place in the series as a whole, and it echoing the work in Harry Potter.
Yeah. That's well, I learned about chiasms from a theologian named James B. Jordan, and he is just this incredible Bible teacher, and he does everything chiastically. And so I had gotten familiar with it, and I remember when I read through the Harry Potter books, maybe the second time I read through it, I was like, dang, like I was reading Deathly Hallows, and I was like, there's so much that reminded me of the first book, because it's going back to his origins.
There's like 30 or 40 references to Philosopher's Stone.
And so like I picked up on that, and then I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, Goblet of Fire, there's 7 books. So it's like Goblet of Fire is in the middle, and that's kind of like where everything changes. Like the first 3 books kind of they escalate, and then boom, when you get to Goblet of Fire, it's a longer book. She blows up the world. The
Dark Lord returns,
and then of course, boom, that's it. That's like the hinge point where Voldemort returns. And so like I knew, like, just right there, that there was that chiastic structure, and I kind of was looking at, okay, well, you've got Sirius is a major character in 3 and 5, and then I was just trying to like piece some stuff together, and but I only did it loosely, and it was just like a fleeting thought. I thought, I don't know, surely this is just me, you know what I'm saying? Like seeing, but then, so when I listened to that podcast, and she said ring structure, but I knew she was describing a chiasm. I was like, so I was right. So I was freaking out. But that was one of those things that, at least I could describe before I, got into some of this stuff that I could sell. Like if you were to ask me what makes the books so good, I would say that I don't know of any other story. And because I'm like more of a movie person, so I watch all the stuff, X-Men, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, whatever. And, this is the one series that I feel like is a notch above because it is the same villain from the very first movie all the way through. And these characters develop. You get to watch him grow up from a child, and there are stuff that she'll put in the first book that she won't develop until the third. And it's like that storytelling is so good. The payoff, once you get to Deathly Hallows, the payoff is so incredible because you know the characters so well, and this conflict has escalated. And it's just like every book has its own little mystery to it, but it's blowing up this larger puzzle, this question that you've been asking from the very beginning. What's the deal with this scar? What's going on with Harry? What's the tying with Voldemort? It's just, it's so good.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I mean, one of the biggest things, this is something that's come up recently because of work we're doing at my Substack, Hogwarts Professor site podcast we do there called Rowling Studies, was figuring out that the core crime, the foundation crime of everything that happens in Harry Potter is the abuse by her brother and father of Merope Gaunt. That Merope Gaunt's using magic to seduce Tom Riddle Sr., through which Voldemort is conceived. That's the core crime. If she's not abused by her family, we don't get the Dark Lord, and there's no Harry Potter grows up, and there's nothing. There's no story except for Merope Gaunt and the abuse in that shack.
yeah.
Well, you don't get that until the sixth book. I mean that's an astonishing thing, and Harry's taken aback. Like Harry's sympathetic. Harry feels bad for the Dark Lord because his mother died. It's just like, whoa, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
But that's the whole point. I mean, is that she spent 5 years planning the books before she really started writing them.
It's genius. Yeah. And you can just tell. You can tell that she knows every aspect, like the 12 uses for dragon's blood or what she said. She knows them. And she has family trees for characters that she's not even going to write. That she's not even in it. So that for me
the books are all told from, I joke about this. It's like the house elf with a mini cam on Harry's shoulder. Harry's not telling you the story. It's not Harry's not the narrator. It's what's it called? Third person indirect discourse, whatever. That you've got the story as if it's being told by an objective observer, but really all you're seeing is what Harry is seeing. There's only like 3 or 4 chapters that are outside Harry's view, and one of them is a dream that Harry's having. He's seeing it through Nagini and the Dark Lord. It's through his Scar Horcrux. That's how she does all of her tricks. But the thing is that she's planned the world and everything. She knows what everybody else is doing that Harry's not seeing, but you're only allowed to see this one tiny scope. I mean, if you had put that house elf on Dumbledore's shoulder, you have an entirely different experience of the story.
Right. Yeah.
Or you put it on Snape's shoulder, you put it on the Dark Lord's shoulder, you put it on Hermione's shoulder. You got an entirely different book. But the thing is, the world, she has all the knowledge of everything that Harry's not seeing.
Mm-hmm.
They say she says there's a box somewhere that has all of her notebooks with all of her stuff in it. And I thought, wow, that's a gold mine.
Yeah, there's a documentary where she pulled out she got crates of stuff, and she pulled out this drawing of the interest into Diagon Alley or whatever that she drew, and it's just like she just knows it inside and out. It's so cool. Anyway, we've gotten away from the unicorn's blood, so let's go back to the
unicorn's blood. I can remember sitting on the sofa in my house in Pearland and thinking, wow, this is a lot better than I thought. It's got a unicorn in here and it's bleeding. Unicorns, again, just standard tapestry tradition. Unicorns are a symbol of Christ. And so now this thing is being slaughtered, is being, and there's a serpent-like figure that's trying to drink its blood. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty, this is not especially opaque, symbolism here. And Harry gets on the back of Firenze after the confrontation with the Dark Lord, and Draco's run away, and Harry's frozen and is about to be attacked by what we know is Quirrell de Mort. And all of a sudden Firenze appears, a centaur, which is another symbol of Christ. It's half man, half beast. It's sort of the God man polarity there in one. Anyway, he jumps on Firenze's back. Firenze is the Italian word for Florence, and almost all of this esoteric symbolism comes out of Florence in that tradition. So it's an intentional name there.
Yeah.
And he gets on Firenze's back, and which of course is a great scandal. You're not supposed, anybody who's read C.S. Lewis knows that you don't jump on a centaur's back. But anyway, that he invites him on his back and carries him out of the forest, and he's, he says, "What do you know about, unicorns?" He says, "Oh, we've used the hair from the tail and potions or something." And he's like, "What you got to know is the blood. If whoever drinks the blood of a unicorn, no matter how close he is to death, will be saved. But if he drinks it unworthily, he'll be damned." And I was like, "Whoa!" Yeah, I can remember literally dropping the book on the sofa and being like, "That, I mean." That's First Corinthians. That's Paul trying to explain to people about how they're not receiving the body and blood of Christ correctly, and this leads to not to death, really, their spiritual death. And I was just like, end of story. We know what happens to the Dark Lord. He's drinking the blood of the unicorn unworthily. This story is over. This guy he's lost. The game is done. But Harry, of course, he's 11 years old. He's dumb as he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, and he's just whatever.
Yeah.
And so are we. I mean, we're with Harry's head, and we're just we're riding on the centaur's back with him. Like, okay, take us back to Ron and Hermione. That to me was the first just dead giveaway.
Yeah.
And the fact that he meets the Dark Lord again in the forest, the chapter is called "Into the Forest Again." And the question is, which again? Because he's been in the forest in Chamber of Secrets with the spiders. He's been in the forest in a lot of time, but it's clearly a reference, I think, to the Philosopher's Stone chapter. He's in there. He's going to go into the Dark Lord. He's going to die. That's that reference to this, and his having been damned is the reason why he's able to, when he kills Harry Potter, they both go to that transit station. Voldemort's mutilated soul is on the floor there, and Harry has his talk with dead Dumbledore, who is glowing like a lamp, is totally illuminated. That otherworldly moment at King's Cross, which Rowling said, I thought that symbolism was meaniful. King's Cross. It's just like, hello. I mean, King's Cross is one of the largest stations on the London Tube. So it's also where her parents met. Apparently, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff about King's Cross. But she said the symbolism was, I thought, apt. To this otherworldly event. They've come to the center of the cross where every thought is what's real. I mean, it's an amazing scene. Harry can see. Harry's all but blind, but at King's Cross, he doesn't need his glasses. And when he just thinks of clothes and the clothes appear. I mean, that's it's where thought is reality. He's gone to Logos land. He's gone to the Logos heart of reality. The beneath and the behind and the within of everything existent is this Logos. And Harry's gone there at his sacrificial death. And the Dark Lord is there too. But the Dark Lord is there in the mutilated form of a person who drinks unicorn's blood. He's not in good shape. She said she waited 17 years to write that scene. And specifically the line at the end where Harry asks him about,
it's real.
is it real or just in my head? And he said, of course it's real, but why? Of course it's in your head, but why would you think it's not real? Because that logos capacity within you is the most real thing about you. It's the only thing it's the metaphysical, ground on which everything is based, is that logos capacity, which also is your thinking, but really it's your heart intelligence. And that gets into the symbolism of Harry, Ron, and Hermione in the Soul Triptych, which is a big Rowling signature. Her core belief is in the immortality of the soul, and she uses in everything that she writes. She puts a representation of the soul in trial, which traditionally is called psychomachia, the battle of the soul, and she uses the most common form of that, which is a triptych. We're used to it from the characters in Star Wars and Star Trek. There's a body, mind, and a spirit. There's a Bones, there's a Spock, and there's a Kirk. I mean, and that's right. But it really comes from, well, it comes from Plato in the Phaedrus, and the chariot in the Phaedrus. But in modern literature, it comes from Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. The three brothers are the body, mind, and spirit. And I don't know if Rowling has read that, but she certainly is familiar with the tradition. She's read the myths. That's her real strength. And she decides to fold that into the schoolboy novel, where there's always, there's the hero, male or female. There's the super intelligent person, and then there's the sidekick who's an athlete jock type of guy, just concerned with good food and good play.
Explained to me as like the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion.
Okay. Again, it's the same thing.
They're
same
borrowed
thing.
probably from the same tradition or whatever.
That's right. And so this, but she's really she leans heavily on the schoolboy tradition. That's why you have a Trelawney. She's every one of these books has a crazy French teacher. That's Trelawney. I mean, everybody laughs at, and that's, and Snape is the sadistic teacher, and there's the beloved headmaster. It really is all. That's all the formula players in Harry Potter come out of Tom Brown's school days. The thing is they make Hermione into a woman, and and Ron. He's stacking the part, but they bring the alchemy into that because of Ron and Hermione being the quarreling couple of alchemy. I mean, she really takes this up, but the really most important thing is that she makes them body, mind, and spirit, and that Harry is the spirit. Harry is the heart character in that. They call it a soul triptych after an icon stand of three icons, but that soul triptych of body, mind, and spirit is what gives the Harry Potter story its first level of experience. Beyond allegory, this stands for this, it stands for that, is you enter into that story and you're reading the books. There is simply no way that you don't love Harry, Ron, and Hermione when they're right side up.
Yeah.
And that's Ron carrying the luggage, because he's not. I mean, if Harry's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, Ron is a spoon. I mean,
they need Hermione.
and Ron's great. He's courageous. He's loyal. He has this one moment in Deathly Hallows, but he's loyal. And I shouldn't say that. He also has this moment in Goblet of Fire. Okay, but that trio, when the body is in service to the mind, basically, it may throw up great ideas, but they're all wrong, and eventually they go with Hermione's ideas. And Hermione not trying to tell Harry what to do, but supporting him in what Harry perceives as the right thing to do. When that soul is right side up, and C.S. Lewis talks about this in Men Without Chess, that essay in, gosh, I'm forgetting the book. Well, you just look up the essay Men Without Chess, because that's where he talks about the soul triptych. When that thing is right side up, the spirit character is directing the basically the body soul, the mind and body combination characters, and you identify with Harry. So when Harry makes that saving people thing choice,
Yeah, either.
You're making that choice because you've identified with him. And when you make that leap of imagination, where you identify with that character, you then you have that cathartic experience when they go through a purifying act, you're going through it as well. Because when you read, you're not reading with your intellect. You are reading with your intellect, but that word, wrong use of that word. You're not reading with your rational, discursive brain. You're reading with your imagination, which Coleridge and even St. Maximus the Confessor is recognizes as this logos capacity within you. When you read a story, that's why Christ only teaches in story, really. I mean, he has his conversations with his disciples, but really when he teaches, he only teaches in story because as the logos himself, he knew that when he told stories, the logos capacity within each person was engaged.
Yeah.
And that's what he was there to do, was to, the kingdom of heaven within you is that ruling power. That's what kingdom is, basileia is. This ruling power is this logos within you. When Christ tells a story, that ruling power is engaged.
Yeah.
Not your rational discursive mind, but that heart intelligence, as he calls it, always calls it the heart. That capacity is what he wants, not your logismy, not your thoughts. He wants your heart, because that's him. that's his reality within you. When you tell a story and you have that soul triptych, the reading capacity recognizes itself, subject and object elide, right? So that you become Harry Potter. And what Harry experiences, you're experiencing. And that's the profound effect inside the books that you don't get in the movies. Movies are a sensorial experience. But when you imagine when you imagine yourself inside the books, and Harry is going through these crises, then you're having those crises as well.
You're going through it, yeah.
And when those three characters are mixed up, when Ron decides to go off on a bender in Goblet of Fire, and he doesn't like Harry because Harry didn't tell him about putting his name in the goblet, or Hermione decides to tell McGonagall about the broomstick and it gets taken away, and whenever those three are not on board, it's agony to the reader.
Dark days, yeah.
You just can't wait. But I can't even talk about after the first task in Goblet of Fire, the first Triwizard task. See, I'm going to do it here. Every time I talk about it, I start to cry. Because when Ron comes into the tent and says to Harry, someone's trying to kill you. When he comes into that tent and says that, and Harry's like, yeah, it took you long enough. And Hermione's like, she just starts to weep because they're all friends again.
Yeah. They hug. Oh man. Like
that moment is so powerful because the soul is back together again and right side up.
Yeah.
Everybody's on board again.
Everything's
and
right
you
with
feel
the world
it
again.
snap together inside of you, like, oh. And that virtue,
finally.
that virtue of the soul being in its place with the spirit directing the body and the soul, or the body and the mind, that moment is really the power of Harry Potter, is you're identifying with that. Because by the end of the story, when you walk into the forest after the battle, the Battle of Hogwarts has been suspended while the Dark Lords put this thread out. You give us Harry Potter or we blow up all of Hogwarts and everybody dies. And Harry decides, I'm walking into the forest. I'm doing it. Because he's learned through Snape's memory that it's all been set up this way. It's all been set up that he'll sacrifice himself to die in the end.
This Calvary.
And he does it. Well, we're doing that too. We walk into the forest with Harry. And we can't believe how heroic we are. We can't believe how courageous we are, And then we find that we've lived to fight another day. We rise from the dead with Harry. The reason that these books are so powerful and have the popularity that they have is because their structure, their symbolism, the psychomachia, the literary alchemy, all of this stuff is to bring you to a point where you experience an imaginative resurrection. because that's what the human being is designed for, is to long for and to live in such a way as to experience that resurrection in Christ. And Harry Potter delivered, I mean, I call this the Eliade thesis. To explain Pottermania, I said, really, the Eliade thesis is my best bet, and it still is, for why people around the world love Harry Potter. And the Eliade thesis comes from really a throwaway line in Mircea Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane, which I recommend to everybody to read. Eliade says, in a secular culture, myth, story, be it on the page or on the screen, story serves a mythic or a religious function, which means that in a secular culture, meaning where God has been displaced to the periphery, and it's not the focus of human life the way it is in almost all traditional civilizations. Traditional really is a synonym for theocentric. And we don't live in a theocentric civilization. We live in an egotistic, desire-driven world. Yeah. And so Eliade says, in that kind of world, this capacity that you have within you, which is really who you are, this logos within you, doesn't have oxygen, can't breathe. And inside this secular culture, story, because of its symbolism, its cathartic possibilities and potential, it allows oxygen to that capacity, because when you read a story, you turn off that discursive mind, you turn into this heart capacity. Now, the stories can be edifying or they can be trash, but it's still going to be exercising that capacity within you.
Yeah.
When the best stories, and the extension of the Eliade thesis is the stories we love the most are the ones that serve that function the best.
Yeah.
And so stories like The Lord of the Rings, stories like The Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, Twilight to some extent, believe it or not, Hunger Games, certainly. They both have soul triptychs in them. They both use literary alchemy. Both, Stephanie Meyer and Suzanne Collins are wonderfully intelligent writers, and they were not oblivious to what Rowling was doing inside Harry Potter. They may have read my book, oddly enough, my first book. But that's, I'm sorry, people are going to say, "Oh, John, you marvelous egotist." But I was the only person writing about those things, and they used them in their book. So who knows? Maybe they did. Stephanie Meyer, she studied with the premier, a guy named Stephen Walker, the premier Tolkien scholar in the United States, was at Brigham Young University, and he was her favorite professor. I've talked to Stephen Walker. He talks about these things. Hermeticism is a huge part of Mormonism. And Stephen Walker recognized that right away. In fact, the whole chiastic structure of the Book of Mormon, the Mormons believe it was because it's an ancient document that he found and he translated. I think it's because it was just part of the conversation then about how you write great books, and Joseph Smith was able to write that book. Now waiting for the Latter-day Saint mafia to come after me. They always do. But that experience inside story is what makes Harry Potter so phenomenally meaningful to people, especially to the unchurched that don't have that sacramental experience of the life in Christ. And yet they're human beings. They're images of God. They have this capacity within them, and they long for it, and they experience it inside the story.
Yeah. It's like we're a culture that's just desperate. There's an unconsciousness to it. It's our subconscious level where we're like dried out sponges, and then that. I'm going to interrupt you here. It's not subconscious or unconscious. It's super conscious. It's this logos capacity, which is again, the thing which brings you into existence every moment. It's been everything into existence, including visible and invisible. All right. That super conscious thing is all of a sudden what you enter into, and you're like, oh my God, my life is so much bigger and more important than I thought it was. It's not just my egotism. That's why I love the title is the how Harry casts his spell, because if you look at, and I think you start your book out this way talking about Pottermania and just the insane fandom that it has. And as you said, I imagine 100 years from now, we'll still be reading and studying these books in discovering the genius behind that you so appreciate and are trying to bring to light. But we got theme. I mean, geez, it's been a long time since these books have been written, and it still feels like they're at the height of their popularity. They're still doing movies, still working on another upcoming TV show, and it's like it's timeless. And every generation is there's an obsessiveness to it, and yeah, there's the big question is like why? What makes this so special? And so I want to get into some of the content now. So, because we've already touched on a lot of this, so you can skip it. Like if you feel like you've already covered it, I kind of wanted to start with like for someone just baseline. If you already mentioned like the smoking gun there with the unicorn blood. So I definitely want to talk about symbolism. So if you want to jump to that, we can. But I was going to say if you had 5 minutes to explain to someone who is a Harry Potter fan that maybe was a skeptic, and you were to say, this is going to be the biggest piece of evidence that I could say that convince you that these are Christian works, what would that be? And again, I know we've already kind of cracked open that.
Yeah, to me, the biggest thing to me is the resurrection experience, especially if you understand Harry as the heart character of the books, that provides that experience. That to me is just not possible if she's writing a Hindu novel or a secular novel. It's just not credible. But then you've got to go into the structure. Why is the chiastic structure so important? Not only in Harry Potter, but in Scripture. Why do they write that way? Well, it's because it's a cross. It's especially the ring. If you draw the ring, the circle, and you have the beginning and the middle and the end, basically the axis of the story, and it's called a turtleback structure because it's a turtleback. It's got a circle, it's got an axis, and it's got lines coming across it, connecting the part. And you go around the circle, and you go A, B, C, D, C, B, A, back again to the latch at the bottom. The reason that that's so satisfying a story structure, or a rhetorical structure, or any kind of narrative structure, is because it brings you to the center. The meaning is in the middle, and that's and everything about this has to tie together the same way that the real symbolism of Harry Potter is the circle and the cross. I mean, you got the shirt on right there, in a way. But that the circle, that there's the Ravenclaw door says what? Which came first, the phoenix or the flame?
Yeah, the little riddle.
And Luna Lovegood says, a circle has no beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the door says, well done, and lets them in. Now, that circle has no beginning thing. Maybe McGonagall says that. I forget. There's two questions there. Forgive me. It's been a little while since I read them. But the circle has no beginning. That's really a giant tell inside the series, because a circle does have a beginning, but it's not visible. It has no beginning. Because the beginning isn't on the visible circle. The beginning is the origin. Right. And all points are equidistant from that circle. That's also the symbolism of the cross. Just to go ahead and put a cross, bisecting that circle in two directions, horizontal and vertical, sort of like a Cartesian system. Both of them reveal that center point. The circle is the revelation of the center. You don't see the center, but the only reason you know that it's a circle is because all those points are equidistant from that point you can't see. This is why the circle is the usual symbol in traditional cultures for the Trinity, because you have the circle, which is the visible piece of it, but you know that there's a point that you can't see, and then you know that it radiates outward, or you wouldn't be able to tell that thing. So there's three elements that are visible in the circle, only one of which is visible to the eye, but to the mind and the heart, that center point and its radiance are also visible. Right? So when she says the circle has no beginning, it has an origin, which is this logos that creates everything. And that, the phoenix or the flame, again, the phoenix is a symbol of Christ. It dies and rises from its own ashes. It's the resurrection bird in traditional language. Ask that question, and she goes to the circle answer. That's more than weighty. That's a giant thing. That's the kind of stuff that Rowling is embedding inside these books. And we get it at King's Cross. We get it in the Deathly Hallows symbol. The bisected circle that's inside a triangle. I mean, that she's talked about it being, she thinks it was a subconscious taking from the Masonic thing. It's actually an alchemical symbol. You don't want me to go through all that, but that type of symbolism, again, is simply adding up. The structure is something we don't perceive. When I broke the code on Rowling's structure of every single book being a ring, and the series as a whole being a ring, when I broke that code in 2010, how many hundreds of millions of people had read the books in the series at that point, and nobody had gotten it. Nobody had. I mean, these two people, the Red Hen, Joyce Adele. And gosh, I'm so ashamed. I can't remember my friend's name in New York. He was known as Merlin online. Merlin Matters. Forgive me. They saw it in the series, but none of them saw it in the individual books.
Yeah. And
when I broke that down and explained it, the real question was, why did nobody see this? I mean, you talked about, you'd studied some of this stuff and it was like, oh, maybe this works in terms of the series, but you didn't get it in terms of the books. Every one of these books has a turning point that ties to the beginning and the end. And then the chapters go with those transverse lines to make that turtleback structure. Nobody got it. Some of them are just some of them are hilarious. That like in Goblet of Fire, when they arrive at the castle finally after the whole Quidditch World Cup type adventure, and they finally get there on the going out to the halfway point, and they arrive at Hogwarts, and it's horrible rain, and they're being hit. Peeves is throwing water balloons, and everybody's soaking wet. And the chapter immediately across from it on the circle is the second Triwizard Trask, where Harry goes underwater. Mm. I mean, these things, these echoes across the line, these reflections of the story and dialogue and characters and theme. Every book, every chapter has its resonance with another chapter inside the same book. Yeah. Now, why is that satisfying? Well, it's only satisfying because the heart, that four-chambered heart, that basically, which is a circle and a cross inside of it, which is your heart, your literally organic heart, that beats, has a contraction and expansion, much like God's transcendence and immanence, which is its core reality that it reflects. That is reflected in story by an A, B, C, D, C, B, A type structure, where the center is the turning point, but everything else lines up and takes you to the center of that circle, that story ring. That's the power of that structure. And it's entirely superconscious. It's entirely logos and heart perceived. It's not perceived by the discursive mind, but it is experienced. Yeah. And once you see it and you're astonished by it, I heard a whole book on it. It's really a transcription from a lecture I gave in New York in 2010 called Harry Potter as Ring Composition. You can look that up if you want. That book, which has been ridiculously plagiarized by things like that podcast you were talking about and MuggleNet things. But anyway, that explanation is something that nobody got, and yet every single person experienced. And it is working together with the soul symbolism. It's working together with the literary alchemy. And it's working together with the Christian symbolism of resurrection and all the menagerie of animals that represent Christ. Mm-hmm. That like the griffin, it's half eagle, it's half lion, it's the king of heaven, it's the king of earth. I mean, the griffin is a fantastic Christian symbol. Gryffindor, it literally means the golden griffin, the light of the griffin is because gold is the illuminated metal. I mean, that's what Harry is. That's what Dumbledore is a Gryffindor, right? And then they have the hippogriff, which is a wonderful play from Orlando Furioso. I mean, that's a long story about how we get to the hippogriff as opposed to the griffin. But still, that kind of symbolism permeates the book.
Yeah.
When you have all those things working together, the structure, the symbolism, the alchemy, the psychomachia, all of those things are meant to engage the heart and bring it to an experience of the center, which is, Christ. It's the point of origin for everything created, the circle that we live in. That's what Rowling delivers inside the Harry Potter epic. And it's nothing close to it. Even I mean, Tolkien, writes the Lord of the Rings. The Hobbit is a ring. The Lord of the Rings is a ring. He embeds the name in the title.
Mm-hmm.
The Chronicle of Narnia stories, all of the things that Lewis Rider rings. I mean, she gets that. She's a close reader. I mean, the reason that Harry Potter works again is the Eliade thesis, but why she does better than all other authors. What Eliade says the best books do is because she understands how all those things work. Now, she describes her writing process as a lake in a shed, that her core beliefs and her unresolved psychological issues give her stories, give her story ideas. And then she takes that, gelatinous mass out of the lake and she takes it into her shed. And that's where she pounds it into story. She uses mythic templates. She uses, literally, there's a wonderful book by Beatrice Groves at Oxford called Literary Illusion, Harry Potter. I recommend to everybody, and especially to Christian listeners. The chapter 4 in that talks about the Guiler Beguiled, which is really the heart of the Voldemort story, is how Dumbledore basically fools the Dark Lord the way that God fooled Satan in the incarnation of Christ. The Guiler Beguiled is, that basically Satan is the deceiver, and yet he is deceived in taking Christ into hell. And hell is destroyed, ravaged because of that deceit, that the deceiver was deceived. And that Dumbledore is doing the same thing. That's really the Christian foundation to the plan to defeat the Dark Lord is taken from the Christian victory over the devil. Again, that's Beatrice Groves. That's not mine. It's not in my book. That's first grade stuff. And there's stuff being done now I can't talk about. Doggone it. That's Christian content. That's a theologian and a philosopher at an American college in the Midwest. I wish I could tell you more. God willing, I can't even say he or she, or I'll get in trouble with her. Oh, I said her. Oh, okay, it's a woman.
I can edit it out if you don't want to get.
No. Your mind will be blown sometime in 2025 when this brilliant woman shares about the theological underpinnings of Harry Potter. I'm very excited about that. While at the same time I'm saying to her, there's more. There's some. The personal side to Harry Potter is frightening in some respects. And that will be our next interview. We'll talk about when that whole story breaks. I'll bring that up with you.
Yeah, awesome. That's great.
But right now, the shed stuff, again, the alchemy, the psychomachia, the Christian symbolism, the structure, all those things work together so that your cardiac intelligence, this logos within you, John 1:9, the light that comes into every man in the world, which is Christ, this ruling power, the kingdom within you, that gets oxygen from these stories.
Yeah.
And all of them working together simultaneously to give you that experience gives you that experience in a singularly powerful way.
Yeah.
Much more so than the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You did a great job in your books. It's just taking all that kind of one chapter at a time, because it's overload. It's kind of hitting you from all directions, and you don't know a lot of it's just kind of going over your heads, but it's resonating kind of deep within you in ways that you can't even really describe. It's
I like that over your head, because that's really what's happening. It's again, it's a super conscious thing, not a,
yes.
we use the word subconscious and unconscious, and that's usually your desires, what in scripture is stomach. It's not the not the best part of you. This aspect of you in literature, what Lewis called instructing while delighting, is this edifying of your spiritual capacity in story.
Yeah. Let's jump to names, because that was one of my favorite chapters in your book, because that was one of the, it's really hard to argue against that, because obviously she has to choose the names intentionally for each character. And some of these were, I'm trying to think if there's any of this stuff that I kind of picked up myself. Maybe Sirius was like the only one, just because like you have Sirius Radio and the logo was a dog, and it's after a star. So I knew Sirius. I'm trying to think if like the first time I read through that, I don't think I took it to the point where I heard the name Sirius and somehow knew that he was going to be an animagus, or whatever. But let's talk about the names.
Well, you mentioned Sirius Black. He's only mentioned once in the first book. He doesn't really come on the scene until the third book. And there's a lot of jokes. He's an animagus. He's a dog. Sirius is the dog star. Excuse me. Sirius is he's also he's a depressing guy. So he's Sirius Black, meaning he's just, that's what he is. He's an escaped prisoner and he's had a hard time. Sirius Black. But he's also his name. Even when I was struck when I read the first 3 books, because that's when I first read them seriously, and then the Goblet of Fire came out. I had that long gap, and I said these are clearly alchemical books, because we get every one of the books has a black, white, and a red stage. For example, Albus Dumbledore, his name means white. Albus means white.
Albus, yeah.
So that whole time at Hogwarts, until Harry goes miles beneath Hogwarts or whatever, is the white stage of alchemy, and the black stage is clearly Privet Drive. It's a dark place, and the red stage is the climax of the story. That's where everything comes together and everything is revealed. Well, we have a character named Black inside the story. And we have a character named White inside the story. And we have a character named Red inside the story. Rubius Hagrid, his name means red. And we get several more reds, Rufus Scrimgeour. We get a bunch of reds by the end of the books. That was one of the first triggers to me about the names being important. But there are funny ones. I don't know if this edition of How Harry Casts His Spell, does it have the Peter Pettigrew thing in it? Because that's the funniest one.
I'm trying to remember.
I think Tyndale said to me I couldn't put it in the book because it would scandalize Christians everywhere, and the book would be known just as the Peter Pettigrew book because of that joke. They would dismiss everything I wrote because of the Peter Pettigrew joke. So I'm going to offend you by telling you the joke, and maybe your listeners will only go away from this thing. Forget all the things I talked about alchemy, all the things about the structure. All they'll remember is Peter Pettigrew. But Peter Pettigrew is a coward.
Yes.
He's lacking in masculine virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And his name isn't that hard to parse, especially if you're a person who grew up in the 60s, which Rowling and I both did. Because both in the UK and the United States, Peter was a name for a man's penis. Right. You talked about Peter. That was a commonplace, was to talk about a person's Peter. Mm-hmm. My name is John. People talk about a John as a toilet. There are names like that. Yeah. So Peter has that association. It's also the name of Rowling's father. And every person who's named Peter or Simon in the books any of her books are bad characters. So here's Peter, and his last name is the real tell. And she pulled it from a P.D. James novel because she understood what it meant. Pettigrew means it didn't grow to be very large.
Mm.
It's small, pettigrew, right?
Yeah, that's definitely
Right?
not in the book.
Okay. So Peter Pettigrew means, a guy without a package.
Yeah.
And he's lacking in masculine virtue.
That-
He's a
That
coward.
describes that. Yeah, that sums up his whole.
Okay,
character.
but it gets better. People say to me, "Oh, John, come on. Yeah, you're making this stuff up." What is his nickname?
Wormtail.
That's right.
Oh my.
Wormtail.
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh.
Yeah. So, I'm like, that's funny. That's really funny.
Yeah.
It reveals the character and his failings and all those things.
Yeah.
It's kind of crass. It's not something you're going to tell to your 7-year-old, but that's a wow name, right? Now you can edit this out if you want. This is gonna, if you can do the Tyndale option and cut this out. But that's Rowling is a brassy woman. She really she loves jokes. All those jokes about Uranus and stuff like that in the book. She loves that stuff.
Yeah.
All the jokes about wands and their stiffness. Come on, she knows what she's doing there. This is not this is not especially opaque. It's they like to they like to play that game.
Yeah.
Okay, that's funny. But then you get to something like Harry Potter. Okay, now clearly she's into names. She says that she has notebooks just dedicated to names.
Yeah.
And believe me, every book that she's written have, like Cormoran Strike and Robin Ellicott. They're both named for birds. And one's a giant, awkward seabird, and one's this, is a robin. and that's a part of the story is their relationship as these two birds.
So good. It's so good. Oh my gosh.
But that understanding of names, because a name in traditionalist literature, for example, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and so we say, that the Jesus prayer is what we call the javelin prayer. It's also what monastics say without ceasing. After Thessalonians, Paul instructing his disciples pray without ceasing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tall order. Mm-hmm. Orthodox monastics do that by saying the Jesus prayer without ceasing, so it's constantly going in the back of their head. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Now, why the publican's prayer? Why are they saying that prayer again and again and again? Because to say the name of Christ is to invoke the name, is to be in the presence of the named. That's a traditionalist formula as across all revealed traditions, but especially in Christianity. To say the name is to be in the presence of the named. And so in literature, there's whole books. I've got books that talk about just names in literature. The reason you put a story like that on there is that's just in things like Pilgrim's Progress, where you get, gosh, what are the names in Pilgrim's Progress are all gold, gosh, what's the name of the Mr. Know-It-All? What's the name of the guy and stuff? Anyway, they're marker of who these characters represent. Well, Rowling does that in a slightly more subtle fashion. And people laughed out loud in 2002. My first book came out. I said that Harry Potter was, clearly to be understood as the heir of the Potter, basically the son of God. And I can't tell you the scorn that was rained on me for that interpretation. And of course, when Deathly Hallows came out, now it's like, oh yeah, we know that. We've always known that. I was like, okay, but that the heir of the Potter is because in Scripture, go ahead, pull down your concordance and pull out all the references to God as the Potter, the shaper of the human vessel,
Mm-hmm.
And that the heir of the Potter is essentially his son. And that if you read the stories as the Christian everyman, which you should, or as Harry as a symbol of Christ, which is a bit of a stretch until, well, it's an overstretch until you get to the last book. But that idea, if you understand that every one of her characters has a meaningful name, for example, Hermione Granger, all right, she had different names in the drafts and this and that, but she came on Hermione Granger. It's a really powerful name. First, it's a pointer to The Winter's Tale, which is we think that almost certainly she read that book for her A levels in the UK. That play, and Hermione is a character who's turned into stone and stuff. I don't like to tell you the whole Winter's Tale story, which is an alchemical, masterpiece. But Hermione Granger plays the intelligent, feminine, insightful character inside the books. And Ron is the masculine, physical, pugnacious side of the books. Well, his middle name is Bilious, and her first name is Hermione. Well, let's get Hermione first, okay? In terms of alchemy, you've got what they call the quarreling couple of Mercury and sulfur, okay? Mercury represents, and this is in Romeo and Juliet. You have Mercutio battling with Tybalt. They're the quarreling couple inside that book between the Montagues and the Capulets. And Mercutio is the super intelligent, relatively effeminate character. He gives marvelous, eloquent speeches inside the thing. I mean, he's the smart guy. And Tybalt, he's like a mixed martial art fighter. He just has one idea: I'm going to kill you. I'm going to beat you up. This kind of thing. And he's sulfur. He's that masculine, physical character. And in alchemy, the conflict between Mercury and sulfur, the quarreling couple, is the friction that causes the purification of the lead into gold. All right. And so in alchemical literature, you've got to have a quarreling couple that one represents Mercury and one represents sulfur. Well, Hermione's name, as much as I love it as a Granger, I'm so glad I wasn't named Snape, but anyway, that Hermione Granger's name, her initials are HG. I don't know how much chemistry you took, but HG is on the periodic table as the symbol for Mercury.
For Mercury? Holy cow.
Okay.
There you go.
Her parents are dentists who do fillings with mercury.
With Mercury.
Okay.
Yeah.
Her name, Hermione, is from Hermes. It's the feminine of Hermes, which is Mercury in Greek.
Yeah. Wow.
Tell me that's an accident.
No way.
No. And Ron's middle name is Bilious, which is all the characteristics of sulfur. And so Harry, in every book, Harry says, "Will you two shut up? I can't stand.
Yeah.
You two stop bickering. Will you two stop fighting?" And when they finally lock lips, and the quarreling couple is resolved in the Battle of Hogwarts, when Ron says something nice about the house elves and Hermione embraces him and kisses him, the story is over.
Good.
The story is over because the quarreling couple have united. Harry has become the Philosopher's Stone. He's going to win now. And sure enough, it has to play out. It's a wonderful ending. But on the chemical scale, as soon as the quarreling couple finally get together, it's done. It's done.
That's so good.
And that's in the names.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm confident that, I studied this stuff. I was into Hermetic literature and stuff like that at the University of Chicago. I was at the University of Chicago. That's where Mercy Eliade was. And I was introduced by my mentors there to the traditionalists. Like I read Titus Burckhart's book on alchemy. I read Martin Ling's book on Shakespeare, in which a lot of this is played out, especially about the soul triptych and things like Macbeth. That was part of how I thought. And so when I read the books, I was reading through a different filter than you were.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, well, there's the alchemy, and there's the names, and there's this and that. That wasn't a stretch for me.
Yeah.
And I think that was because I was largely looking through the same prescription eyeglasses that Rowling was. I had the same kind of nominal exposure to Christianity as a child that I did on my own. Basically I went to church when my parents didn't, just like she had. I owned that. And then I fell away from it. And then I came back to it at university when, at least I did, when my mentors were all profound Christians. Profound Christians.
That's so cool.
That I basically went from all Christians are stupid to, by God, you're stupid if you're not a Christian because these guys are scary, brilliant, and they're all
Smart,
Christians.
yeah.
That changed my way, and eventually, of course, I became an Orthodox Christian. Now that experience, I brought that to the books,
Yeah.
and basically, my job is to catch all you up to speed.
Seriously, when I hear you tell your story, I'm like, only you could have written this book. And it's weird talking about, you going place to place and speaking at conferences, like you're just blowing people's minds. It's like we're just not in your head. We don't know this. But you're able to map it out so.
Well, you're very flattering. What's funny now is, I mean, what's the name of this guy? You've read a book called The Moviegoer, Walker Percy?
I don't know.
He wrote an essay once about it's dialogue actually inside one of his novels, where he talks about the 3 steps of scientific discovery, and the first one is rejection. That's not only stupid, but it's dangerous, and you should be cast into the outer darkness. The second step is inquiry, where they say, well, that's still preposterous and stupid. It's going to take years of study and examination to see if that's possibly true. And the third stage is, we've always known that. And and those can come pretty quickly on top of each other.
Yeah, right.
Much like conspiracy theories during the COVID years, used to be, it took conspiracy theories decades to play out. And instead it was like, wow, we got 2 weeks, here we go. There's that conspiracy theory of June is now fact in August. Now, the Harry Potter thing was like that, where I talked about alchemy and they just laughed. And I talked about the Christian content and they were like, no, we understand already. She's a Satanist. And I was just like, okay, and I didn't get it that badly. I mean, I wasn't attacked by the Christian churches in America the way that people like Connie Neal were. I mean, Connie Neal is an evangelical, she's out of Pepperdine, brilliant woman. And she tried to share with the evangelical community, based on her reading of Harry Potter and her knowledge of Scripture, how this worked. Well, I'm gonna tell you, you don't want to go that route, because they had Leviticus owned the board there in terms of Harry Potter. And so she was, I'm sure she's still scarred from that experience. They didn't come after me because I was arguing from literature, and that was a lot more uncomfortable to most Christians. They didn't understand the English literary tradition, which until last week was books by Christians for their greater life in Christ. Yeah. So we don't understand that. We're living in the post-World War II era, where stories are just entertainment and distraction. They really can't be edifying.
Yeah, that's so true.
Until, again, last week, story was understood as the way to instruct while delighting, to teach this, to teach the stock responses, as C.S. Lewis says, to teach people, what right and wrong are by teaching this super conscious mind about how things are actually set up. To see it inside story. Yeah. And all of that, of course, comes from the parables of Christ, that experience. Rowling gets that. Her Christian witness may be not what people want it to be. Sure. Her political opinions and beliefs are usually considered, they're pretty middle of the road for the United Kingdom. We consider them pretty hard left in the United States. Yeah. So be it. The experience that she delivers in story are so profound. I mean, they basically teach you that this is what a human being is and what it's designed for, because there's no other way to explain it. Yeah. And how it was reproduced. I mean, the Twilight experience, which is sort of the Latter-day Saint version of Harry Potter, and Hunger Games, which is kind of the liberal Catholic version of Harry Potter. Those stories, they have soul triptychs. They're based on these structures. They have Christian symbolism out the kazoo, especially the whole death and resurrection thing. That messaging, even though from very different perspectives on the Christian spectrum, I mean, you can't get much different than Catholic, Mormonism, and liberal Anglicanism. That's pretty much covers the spread, right? We haven't got a Pentecostal, but that's maybe that's the next big thing.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, that she did it first, and I think she did it. I think she did it best. Suzanne
Breaking
Collins's
ground, for sure.
Mockingjay, the Hunger Games, the climax of that series, I thought was as powerful as Deathly Hallows. And I'm really excited about that she's got these prequels coming out.
Yeah.
There's what Sunrise of the Reaping or something is coming out in March.
Yeah, I
Really
never
looking forward to
read
that.
first. Yeah.
Anything
That's
from
what got
Susan.
me into reading the book. I watched because I assumed that she was going to do another series. So when I watched that movie, the prequel movie, I went and read the book, and then I read through the whole Hunger Games series.
Well, go to Hogwarts Professor. Go to Hogwarts Professor and go to the Hunger Games pillar post, and you'll see all the things I've written. I've written like 2 books on Hunger Games that never got published except online.
Oh shit! Okay, I'll have to check that out.
I mean, really super profound stuff. And I think you read her Gregor, the Overlander books, which she wrote for Scholastic when Harry Potter was coming out, and they're brilliant. They're really good. They'll never be brought to the screen though because they're all underground in the dark, But that that series was so brilliantly done. And then she came up with the Hunger Games idea, where she really crystallized the best of her world, her vision, which is largely she's the son of a military, she's the daughter in a military family. A lot of her stuff is about warfare.
Right.
But it's also about propaganda and what's real or not real. And that's definitely, everything that Joanne Rowling does is about real, not real. Hence that climactic conversation with Dumbledore about real, not real. What is most real? It's the center of the circle, Harry. It's who you are. How can you not know what that is? That's who you represent. You're the heart character, buddy. And then in Cormoran Strike, in the 5th book, Cormoran and Robin have a real, not real conversation about astrology, which is really it's the middle of the stories. It's a 10-book series. So we're going to find out really what the real, not real thing, how it plays out. And then in Christmas Pig, we have the Blue Bunny episode about what's real, which is maybe the best version of the real, not real inside Rowling. But again, it's all about this heart capacity and its relationship with it's the small lambda logos and the large lambda logos. C.S. Lewis said that that the imagination, is the organ of meaning, and that it is continuous with the fabric of reality, which is the logos. That continuous with the fabric of reality experience is what Rowling is delivering imaginatively to readers everywhere. Now, if you tell people every soul is a Christian soul, they're going to say, hell no, I hate Christians, this, that, and the other. I'm just like, no, you don't understand. Every soul is a Christian soul because every soul is brought into existence by the logos. You can deny Jesus Christ. But, and he says that's forgivable. But you can't deny the Holy Spirit, which is the fact that you're brought into existence. That you are proceeding from something greater than yourself. That's not forgivable because that's to deny, everything that's true and real and good and beautiful. That's, when Rowling gives you an experience that's continuous with the fabric of reality and you embrace it, you don't need to know the whole Christian thing. You've already experienced as much as you can experience imaginatively. The next step is you take the step and you're sacramentally joined to the body of Christ. All right, that's the real experience, being continuous with the fabric of reality. But as much as story can do that, Harry Potter delivers that.
Yeah. And man, I feel so grateful because the way you lay it out so well, it kind of helped me to see some of that in literature. So I just recently read A Little Princess with my daughter, older book from like 1905 or whatever. And so I'm sort of realizing that some of this stuff in literature is it's a little bit more purposeful than just, like you said earlier, just an entertaining story.
I'm,
you
I'm
know,
looking at my shelf here that has, I've got a wall of Secret Garden and Little Princess
yeah,
stuff
yes,
because Burnett is what a story,
it's so
the Burnett
good. It's
story.
so good. But yeah,
If
it's
you
the
if you
thing,
if
man.
you if you Google if you just go to Hogwarts Professor and do a search on Hogwarts Professor for um, Secret Garden because so much of what Rowling does is from Secret Garden.
Yeah, I think we're gonna
Um,
read that one next. We're reading Black Beauty because I saw that was one that J.K. Rowling said that she enjoyed when she was a child. You know, so what my daughter wanted to read is part of her like school list or
Read the Little
whatever.
White
But
Horse. Read the Little
that
White
I think
Horse
that one's
first.
on there. That one's on there too.
Elizabeth
So
Goudge is Rowling talks about other authors being influential, but she always says that the Little White Horse was her favorite story growing up. And there's so much of like Luna Lovegood comes straight out of Little White Horse.
hmm.
And all the animal symbolism and stuff is inside Little White Horse. It's oh well, it's a magnificent,
Yeah,
magnificent story.
yeah. But what I was gonna say is
Um,
just like I realized that so much of these stories are just retelling the greater story that mankind has been separated from their maker, their creator, and it's a story of this redemptive arc. And
you gotta be
there's
careful though. You gotta be careful though, because like Burnett is actually talking a lot about theosophy. She's largely rejecting the Christian narrative of um, salvation
hmm,
and about the fall. And again, read the stuff I've written in Hogwarts Professor about Burnett and
I'll have
Secret
to check
Garden.
that out then. Yeah, but
But the stuff about there's a character in there that has his mother's picture behind a screen, and I mean, believe me, if you when you read Secret Garden, you'll be going, whoa, there it is.
hmm,
It's there's so much inside Harry Potter that you'll say, oh, that's where she got that, and you were
yeah,
supposed to get that, but you hadn't read that story yet.
sure,
Um,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah.
Man, we've talked probably about most about what I wanted to hit. Maybe we can end with the core message of the series, because I think she actually commented on this herself. In she waited until Deathly Hollows to kind of get there, but I don't know. Maybe we already covered this, but that was gonna be my last question. I think we've at least touched on everything that I wanted to talk about. So, yeah, is there
What did
anything
she
else that you
say?
can add to? So I'm referring to the graveyard scene whenever Hermione and Harry visit Harry's parents, their graveyard in I forget the name of the town
Godric's Hollow.
in Godric's Hollow, and there's a couple verses that are on there. I recently watched through the movies, and I was like, did they cut this out of the movie? And I had to pause and sort of like really zoom in, and you can actually see in the movie there's two. Maybe they just put one verse in the movie, but there's two verses. And she, I think, in an interview, said that those two Bible verses like encapsulate the series. I think is what she said. Um, and I don't have it on hand, but one of them I think was from the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5 or 6.
5.
Um,
Where your treasure is, your heart will be also.
that's it. And then I can't remember what the other one was. I think it had something to do
The
with
other one's the last enemy to be destroyed is death.
his death, and that's the whole thing with Voldemort. And his you played that out so well. Voldemort, his whole thing is he's trying to escape death, and he's he's not going to do it. But yeah, so I don't know. Is you have anything else like to add to that, or you feel like this?
Well, I mean,
Like this,
I spent there's a book called the Deathly Hallows Lectures,
mm-hmm,
in which I really take a deep dive into why those passages are important. Um, I think that the one that's relatively obvious is, the last enemy to be destroyed is death, is that um, Harry Potter discovers that, the victory over death is sacrificial love.
yeah,
For God and for neighbor is, you have to sacrifice the old man and take on this ruling power within you as your identity. And really supplant your ego accidental existence, the historical stuff about where you grew up and your family and your education, how much money you have. All that stuff is accidental. You're worm food with that stuff. But this capacity within you, again, becoming continuous with this logos, fabric of reality, that's your victory over death. That's your membership in the body of Christ that has trampled down death by death, as the Orthodox say. Now, that's the relatively obvious one. The more difficult one is where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I mean, I think Dumbledore chooses that for the tombstone of the Potters. I think it's the Potters.
Mm-hmm.
But that if you go to the Sermon on the Mount, it's right before the passage about the eyes. And again, this is a whole nother podcast to talk about this. But you know, eyes are everywhere inside Deathly Hallows. You know, from Harry seeing the eye in the mirror fragment in the bedroom, you know, the single white eye, to the single eye of Mad Eye Moody that Harry puts into the tree. That is the symbol. That's the when Harry buries that eyeball under the tree, that's literally the explanation of the symbol you've got on your chest there, the Deathly Hallows symbol.
Mm-hmm.
That in story, that eye is the circle buried beneath the tree, which is the vertical symbol, and he draws a cross on it, which is that. Anyway, the resolution of opposites you see in that bisected triangle. Anyway, that the eyes are everywhere inside. I think there's actually 5 sets of eyes that she symbolizes, because what we're looking for is a transformed vision. All right, and we want that eye to be single. Well, what passage follows? Where your treasure is, your heart will be also, is the passage where Christ says, if your
eye causes you to sin, gouge it out.
No, it's the one about the shame on me. I don't have this memorized, but it's if your eye is single, then you'll be saved. But if your eye is double, then the light of the body is the eye. If your eye is double, then the light within you is darkness. If your eye is single, then the light will be through you. If that light is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now the single eye is the whole point of the story, and it follows immediately in Scripture from that thing about where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, it sort of closes off a thing, and you go in what seems to be a new passage, but Rowling is clearly linking those two things because of the prevalence of the single eye inside the story. And when she said in that MTV interview in 2007 that, you know, it was asked about the Scripture thing, she says, I think that epitomizes the entire story, which is a misuse of the word epitomize. But that she's saying that reflects the heart of everything I was trying to get at inside these books, is to get you that single eye. And that single eye is the eye of the heart. You know, that if your treasure is with this eye of the heart, this imaginative experience that brings you closer to the fabric of reality, that's your victory over death. And that's why she carves it on the headstone, is to say, you know, find this passage, read this passage, and reflect on what it means in terms of my book. She's laying clues throughout the story about how to read her books. But most obviously, in the last book, she has a kid's book, you know, The Tales of Beetles of the Bard, and the smartest person in the books has been told to read that children's book to understand the symbols of the book so that they can find out, you know, to solve the mystery, solve the crime, you know, help defeat the Dark Lord. And Hermione spends the whole book trying to figure it out. And then when she figures it out, you know, she basically figures out that it's the symbol of the Deathly Hallows. Then she says, no. Let's not do that. We're supposed to be hunting Horcruxes. You know, she, you know, some people have joked that this is her laughing at me because Hermione's middle name, we find out in the will, Hermione's middle name is Jean or Jean, Jean. Her name is Hermione John Granger. And so it struggles to figure out that, you know, the symbolism of the books. And then he gets it wrong. She gets it wrong. She doesn't understand what the Deathly Hallows are. She denies. She's got the invisibility cloak right there with her, and she can't acknowledge it, right? She's thinking of it too discursively. But Harry, the heart, he gets it right away when she breaks the code. He sees right away what this thing is and what he has to do. And then Dobby dies. Dobby dies his sacrificial death. And in the grave, it's Easter morning. It's Easter morning, and Harry has dug a grave. And he climbs out of the grave, and he knows what he has to do. He has at that point, he's become a Christ figure. He's risen from the dead, having left Dobby in the grave, Dobby who died to save his life. He comes up out of the grave, and Harry Potter is a totally new man. He's going to get Horcruxes. He's not going to go after the Hallows. And he's going to deny the power thing, and then he's going to, defeat the Dark Lord. And by denying the power and acting in obedience to what the single-eyed Dumbledore told him to do, even though he finds out that single-eyed Dumbledore was Aberforth, not Albus, he still obeys the single eye because he saw that single eye in the mirror. It's a joke. It's actually from Jonathan Swift's Battle of the Books about the I, E-Y-E, and the capital I, ego I. In Battle of the Books, I think it's Virgil shoots Descartes. It's the ancients versus the moderns. And he shoots Descartes in the eye with an arrow, kills Descartes, because Descartes is the guy who said, I think, therefore I am. An entirely egocentric perspective on the world, right? And so the ancient people, the traditionalists, kill him by shooting him through the eye, the ego. I think, therefore I am. Right? In this book, Harry Potter, who is this heart character, is this eye of the heart, he sees that image and he goes, oh no, that couldn't be, when he first sees the eye. And then when he's in horrible danger in the basement of the Malfoy Manor, he looks at the thing and the eye comes back in and he yells at it, help me, help me. And the eye sends Dobby. And Dobby dies that sacrificial death. And Harry realizes that eye is who he is. That eye reflects, and he has to obey that part of himself. And that's the single eye that Christ is talking about. Not the double vision of your ego existence.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was actually listening to an interview from James B. Jordan, who I mentioned earlier, and he was talking about how Abraham and Isaac and Joseph all kind of go through that same experience when the Lord says, okay, I'm going to give you this promise, I'm going to give you the son, and then now you have to give him up. So like he's left with this choice, right? What am I going to do? Right? Am I going to be obedient here and make this sacrifice? And when he does, that's when, God renews the covenant. Jacob goes through a similar experience when he goes and he brings his family back, and Esau has come to attack, and now he's, what am I going to do? So he gets all these gifts. Joseph, whenever he's faced with Potiphar's wife, is kind of this same sort of thing. He finally is in a position where he's in a position of power, he's thriving, and then he goes down to prison. And then that's when he's elevated. And so that resurrection experience after this choice, are you going to choose the power here, or are you going to go in the way of sacrifice? It's the same pattern that you see in scripture. But it just reminds me right there in the first book, she lays it all out with when he speaks with Dumbledore at the end, speaking about, why is it that he couldn't stand my touch? And he's talking about it's the love that your mother, when she sacrificed herself. Like when I read through that just recently, it got me teary because it's very overtly, once you see it's very overtly Christian, at its core. So anyway,
in Rowling studies, that's really important because her preferred symbol for the selfless, sacrificial, unconditional love of Christ is a mother's love for her child. And so whenever you see, like, there's a reason that Lily Potter's death is what's, salutary to Harry Potter rather than his dad's death. His dad dies, his dad throws himself in the way and no wand and gets blown away. But no one talks about dad's death. it's about the mother's sacrificial love, because Rowling, had experienced that as a child, and Rowling had experienced that as a mother herself, that was the kind of love that was transformative. And that's what she's really after in these books. That's what alchemy is about your illumination. Turning lead to gold is about turning, hard darkness into solid light. The entire alchemical adventure on an esoteric level is about illumination or enlightenment, this light of the world coming to be your reality. That's what gives you eternal life. That's what gives you infinite riches, is this, becoming one with the fabric of reality. That's what alchemy was supposed to be about. Now, in literature, you get that experience of illumination and the cathartic moment where you're purified alongside this. She's trying to give you that transformed vision and that illumination imaginatively. Now, obviously, it's not lasting, because it's not sacramental. It's not really tied to this kind of thing being experienced and you're being received into this body of Christ. But it's oxygen to that capacity, which has atrophied and really grown cold in the postmodern world.
Yeah. I got to say, as a Christian, I really latched on and just resonated with your work. So this is almost a little out of my wheelhouse. I do a lot of speak to theologians, and we're deep in the weeds of some sort of Bible verse or passage. But I was just I'm such a huge Harry Potter fan, and it's like this is kind of my two worlds colliding when I'm doing the podcast and I'm talking about Harry Potter. So it's just so fantastic. So I just want to thank you for coming on, and thank you for your work. For anyone that's like I said, I'm reading through the Cormoran Strike series now, so I'm going to continue following. Like, I'm a little afraid, honestly, to follow too much of your stuff, because what you mentioned with Hermione and Ron, I know you said there's it was a spoiler for a lot of people. They're trying to figure out whether Hermione was going to end up with Harry, but you had this whole thing figured out beforehand. So I know you're anticipating how this Cormoran Strike series is going to end. I don't want to spoil it for myself, because I know you got the secret sauce to all this. And I'm
Nobody has figured out Cormoran Strike, believe me.
Yeah, I love it. It's so good. And I'm glad I can sort of read these as they're coming out. But anyway, so I said I was going to have you kind of just close this out in prayer at the end. Again, we've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Really enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation, or want to plug your website and some other books?
Well, I mean, if you want to read about these things, there's How Harry Cast His Spell. That was the first book I wrote. There's and that's largely the Christian symbolism of the stories, and I give you the tools to understand what we were talking about today, and then go through each one of the books and show how it works in the books.
And I will say, we kind of scratched the surface. So if you listening and you like what we got, you're going to get 20 times more in that book. It was mind blowing. You really are.
There's fun stuff in it. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. I mean, one friend of mine said that he was really skeptical about the whole thing, and then he read what expecto patronum means in Latin, and he literally thought, oh, there's no way that you could say expecto patronum and not be a Christian.
There's so many things in your book that I read was light bulbs just going off, and it's you get more and more confident that this is a Christian thing as you read the book, to where when you're done with it, you're overwhelmed. You're like, this is the Christian series. So I want to I'm so glad to do this podcast, because it's a way for me to sort of promote that idea, because I read the book, and it's like this little secret I want everybody to know. So it's so good, man. You really I was blown away that just your ability to see all this, man. It is really pretty profound.
There's How Harry Cast His Spell. That's the foundation. Mm-hmm. Then there's Deathly Hallows Lectures, where we get into a lot more about how she tied it all together in that book, and its profound Christian meaning. And then there's Harry Potter's Bookshelf, which is how to read at 4 levels, how to read those symbols. I mean, Rowling gives you the key inside Deathly Hallows of the Deathly Hallows symbol. she shows you how to read it at 4 levels because the characters read it at 4 levels. And so she's basically saying, this is how you should read my books.
Mhm.
And I show you how to do that inside
Wow.
the English literary tradition by showing which book she's drawing from that. And then there's the ring composition book, which is very short, but it has all the charts in it that show all the parallels. If you're interested in that, I mean, that's the one where people literally have their minds explode because they can't believe they missed it. Because once you see all the parallels across it, you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I not see this?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a again, I mean, I spent from 2000 to 2010. I don't know how many times I read the stories. I don't know how many. I wrote 3 or 4 books and anthologies and essays and lectures and talks at universities and churches and I didn't get it until Brett Kendall is the name of the guy that came up with this stuff. Knew I'd come up with it eventually. Anyway,
Yeah.
That breakthrough when actually studying C.S. Lewis's space trilogy really is what confirmed in my mind that she was a writer working at an entirely different level than even I expected. The structural piece was a very big deal. So that's called Harry Potter as Harry Potter's ring composition. You can Google that or look it up on Amazon. It's there.
Yeah.
Those 4 books, that's what I've contributed. We're working at Hogwarts Professor, which is both a weblog and a Substack. The podcast is on the Substack. And that's much more current because Rowling has written a lot of things. She's written, her post-Potter publications far outnumber the Harry Potter work. The Cormoran Strike is now, we're waiting on the 8th book.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
And each one of those books is far bigger than their equivalent, even though they're in parallel with the 7-book series. We assume that the 8th book is going to be in parallel with Casual Vacancy, which should be pretty exciting.
Yeah,
That conversation always is in the context of what she did in her first books that most people know. So if you're interested in Harry Potter, come by Hogwarts Professor and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. I need to go pick up your other books. Awesome, man. Really enjoyed meeting you today, man. Thank you for coming on. If that's all, you can kind of just close us out in a prayer and then we'll end there.
Well, we thank thee, O Christ, our God, for this company and this conversation. We pray for our edification in story and in study and for our greater life in thee. For the prayers of our holy fathers and thy most pure mother, we pray, Lord, have mercy. Amen.